to make sure that those dollars are spent in an equitable way, to make sure that all parts of the city are actually touched by these investments. And then finally, we don't want to forget essential government services. At the end of the day, you want your street light fixed in the alley. You want the pothole fixed. You want to be able to call 311 and know that your call is going to be responded to. And so all of those things are sort of guiding principles as we work through the 2022 budget. Those are the investments I talked about. It really does look like a periodic table, but a couple I want to flag. It's $86 million in mental health. We know that trauma and unresolved trauma is the cause of much of the pain and the violence that we are seeing in our communities. There was an interesting article about Will Smith and the slap heard around the world and how that was actually a representation of some unresolved trauma that he had been carrying from childhood. It's a very interesting point, even though he shouldn't have smacked him, but still. We have a community-wide safety approach that is being led by Tamara Mahal, and I always mess up, CSCC, so I'm not going to say what, Community Safety Coordination Center. I did it. Tamara, you want to come on up? Don't forget to do your questions, because we're going to be coming around to collect them. I'm clicking myself.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for being here and braving the rain. My name is Tamara Mahal. I'm the Chief Coordination Officer for Community Safety. And what I wanted to just quickly do was talk a little bit about our approach to violence prevention and community safety, which, believe it or not, starts with COVID, because COVID was a game changer for this administration and the way that the government started to understand how we have to work with community. And the reason for that is that obviously the pandemic affected every single part of our community, but it revealed many of the disparities and root causes that actually are shared with violence, right? The disparities that we were seeing in the number of Black and brown people across the city dying and getting COVID are in many ways the same disparities that contribute to violence. Historical disinvestment, structural racism that lead to community blight, right? The physical degradation of the community, generational trauma, and lack of opportunity, not just for young people, but also for adults in identifying long-term unemployment. And during COVID, we were successful in doing the most important thing, which was listening, and then acting. We were using data to drive us, we were using evidence, but what was most fundamental was that we spent a lot of time talking to different parts of our community and saying, why isn't this working? And them coming back and saying, we're going to tell you why, and then we would put that into action. And because that was so successful, we were able to implement the most equitable distribution of vaccine in the country, and we were able to really turn the tide in a lot of ways, in other ways that cities couldn't. And so Mayor Lightfoot said, let's take those lessons learned and let's apply them against the city's greatest epidemic, gun violence. And so in August, she activated something called the Community Safety Coordination Center, which I have the privilege to lead. And what we're doing there is we are ensuring, first and foremost, that when we think about violence prevention, we are thinking about it in a way that's driven by community. What does hyperlocal mean? This is one of the biggest questions I get. And for us, that means being at the block level. Not just engaging, but making sure everyday residents have the resources that are necessary to build relationships with each other, to protect their homes and their families, and that they have a safe place to live, work, and play. But we're doing all of that utilizing data and evidence-based best practices, some of which established here in the city, but also learning from other cities and even internally at the city from some of the amazing community organizations that are on the ground doing the work every day, and then taking those lessons and applying them to other communities and expanding on that support. We're also coordinating government. We are a complex beast here at the City of Chicago. We have a lot of different departments and a lot of different responsibilities. We are the only city right now in the United States who have their departments sitting in the same spot day in, day out, working together to say, we can't just solve this with police, but we also can't just solve this with long-term strategies. We have to put a comprehensive approach together that addresses what our community is telling us. And when we've gone out and we've engaged and we're listening and we continue to listen and learn, what we've heard is several key things. We need more opportunity for youth, but we need to engage youth. We just had a youth town hall. We're going to continue to do that. They need to be a part of building the solution. We need more access to mental health, which the Chicago Department of Public Health is working on, as well as trauma-informed services. We need more green space. We need to address vacant lots. And one of the biggest things we heard, you can just come and provide support for coordination so that the people who need the help the most are able to get into direct services. And that is the approach that the City of Chicago is taking, but we need your help to do it. And so you're actually going to see on your table, there's QR codes, but websites you can go to, and it has a poll. And in that poll, there's some key questions about strategies we're thinking about. Questions about what resources do you need? What would it look like for you to get security cameras or lights for your home? But also questions about what you think we should be doing right now, but also just what are the ideas that you have. My commitment to you as a Chief Coordination Officer is that you're going to start seeing some of those ideas come to fruition in your communities very soon, before summer, during summer, after summer, so that we can work together with you to implement a comprehensive strategy that addresses the systematic changes that are needed, while also making sure we have support for those that are in need right now. I'm looking forward to answering all your questions. Thank you so much for your time today.
So now we're going to start the interactive part of the program. You have on your table this sheet. I should have put a picture of it on the screen, but I wasn't that creative. That's why you have to be at a table. You can't be by yourself, and it's meant to be table work. What we are asking each table to do is to talk to each other, convene with each other, and determine what are the 5 things that if the city did, those 5 things would make a difference for the city and make the city safer, and a thriving place where all of us felt good about living. So 5 things on this sheet of paper. Please work as a group. If you're at a table by yourself, please move to another table. If you're at a table and it's just your family, please try to integrate in with other members, and we'll try to get some other folks over there. But it's important that it be a diversity of views for this process to work. So I'm going to give you about 15 minutes to do this. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your thoughtful work. We have some great questions. It's going to be great to see what you wrote for your 5 things that'll make the city safe. I want to acknowledge some people that I did not acknowledge before because I wanted the mayor to be here when you got acknowledged. So first, Alderman Lee and Alderman King. I think they're both here still. So. We have a bunch of commissioners and deputy commissioners. If you could stand up, not just the ones up here, the ones that are out in the audience. Cole, deputies, everybody. And then I want to acknowledge the Mayor's Office of Community Engagement staff and the community, the CSCC for all of its help. Before turning the podium over to, I'm not supposed to have favorites, but he is, to Commissioner Chris Brown, the wonderful commissioner for the Chicago Public Libraries.
Thank you, Tina. It's just good to be with all of you, and shout out to my table 11. I think we had a really intimate conversation about kind of how are we getting more support for our families and our parents, because that's such a big part of a safe Chicago. It's so good to be hosting you all here in our gorgeous winter garden of the Chicago Public Library. Our city library does so much to support our families and our neighborhoods in our 81 locations. We have thousands of events for parents and kids as they're developing early literacy. And I just want to give a shout out to the mayor. Chicago Public Library, because of her support, has been able to be one of the largest libraries in the country to have gone fine-free in 2019. And I'm sure that doesn't really affect all of you because you're all great and you've paid all your library fees. But when you look at the data and who those fees impacted, 1 out of 5 children library cardholders had blocked accounts. And when you think about that on a scale at the size of the city of Chicago, those are thousands of students who weren't able to come into their libraries and use them as those safe after-school spaces. And shout out again to the mayor. She also has made Sunday hours a thing for every neighborhood in our city. And we're just, as the library, so invested in this conversation. We need to make sure that our neighborhoods feel safe so that our kids and families can use their neighborhood libraries. And with that, I want to welcome Mayor Lightfoot to the podium and just thank her for all of her leadership.
So I'm going to call you all the warriors, people who came through the rain on a Saturday afternoon when you could be doing something else with your time to be here with us. I want to thank you for being here. We're obviously here to talk about public safety, but public safety, community safety intersects with so many issues. And I know that there were a lot of very robust conversations at the tables, and certainly the ones that I had the privilege of sitting in on. And what I'll say is this, we are here to learn and to listen. The leaders who are here, we work hard every single day, to view all the work that we are doing through a community safety lens. Obviously, we need to continue the good work of making sure that everyone in every neighborhood feels safe now. Not just the perception of safety, but the reality of safety. And I'm happy to tell you, and I'll steal a little bit of the superintendent's thunder, that we are down on shootings, we are down on homicides, and we are down on carjackings this year. Not enough. Nobody's doing a victory lap, but we are making progress because we are holding ourselves accountable as you would expect us to do. Every time there's a shooting in the city, it's not just the person who is firing the weapon who is at risk. It's not just the person who is the target, whether hit or not, but that community is shaken. And we understand that. And particularly, I want to talk for a moment about carjackings. One of the things that's very clear to me about carjackings, it is an unnerving crime in ways that other things are not. There's a young woman who shared her own personal experience, who came here from another city, felt generally safe, and then had this tragic thing happen, and luckily wasn't hurt. But it's clear the trauma is still present and real. That makes you feel like when you're driving your car to go to the grocery store, to go and visit a friend or family, the fear of thinking, if I'm stopped at this light, if I'm pulled over, is somebody going to come up and put a gun in my face? That's the tragedy of carjackings, because it makes people feel unsafe, even in their own vehicles. And again, as I said, I'm happy to report that carjackings are down, but the one area that continues to plague us is the number of teens and preteens that are getting arrested. We were at about 50% of the people arrested last year were teenagers, and even with the decrease this year, the increase is the number of juveniles who are getting arrested for carjacking. And unfortunately, anybody who's been involved in this knows it's usually not the first time. It's over and over and over again. But let me share with you, I think, a good news story, which is a great lesson and inspiration for us. How many of you heard the story of the 11-year-old last fall who was arrested for being the leader of a carjacking crew. 11 years old, right? We heard that story. And I'm sure we thought, how in the heck, maybe another word, is an 11-year-old involved in carjacking? And when the police went to arrest him, they found that this kid had 20 key fobs in his house, which meant he had robbed and stolen a bunch of cars. But we dug into it, and I really got to credit CPS. What we found out is some really heartbreaking things about this young man. Number one is he had been missing from school for 2 years. From 9-year-old, he was arrested when he was 11. He had been disconnected from school for 2 years. That's a failure on our part. We can never let that happen again. And CEO Martinez would be the first to tell you, we've taken concrete steps and more to come to make sure that no child goes missing that long, and certainly not at that age. Why did that happen? It happened because his mom died, his father remains gravely ill, and so the parts of his life were just coming apart. But once he was arrested, we intervened, CPS intervened, and they made sure that he got into a stable home with a caring adult. They made sure that he went to school every day. He became part of a phenomenal program called Choose to Change. He got a mentor who literally every day goes to this kid's house, gets him up, makes sure he's fed, dressed, and gets him to school every day. Now, he's got an older brother who's about 4 years older who keeps trying to tug him back into that life, but luckily this kid has hung in there. And I'm happy to report 2 important things. One, he has not missed a day of school since CPS got involved with him and really started to infuse him with a lot of love and support. And recently, this kid made the honor roll. So that's obviously an incredible success story, but we need to have more success stories like that. And the lesson for us is we've got to meet these kids where they are. What I want to do is make sure that we've got programming at the earliest possible age so we don't have 11-year-olds who we have to intervene with like this. Right, so that's part of the work that we're doing, and Brandy and Dr. Alberti will talk a little bit about that. But when something happens, the thing that we can do is not discard them, not lock them up and throw away the key, although I'm old school, I believe in accountability, and particularly when somebody picks up a gun. But we've also got to recognize these are children. And these are children from a lot of really difficult circumstances that are driving a substantial amount of the crime in the city. So we are able to address that and work with these kids, with you, people in the community. We can turn around the trajectory of those children's lives, which means we improve their families, which means that we provide more supports and stability to neighborhoods. And what else does that mean? We have a safer, more vibrant, peaceful city for the long term. So we've got to deal with the immediate things, and we are. We're focused very much on guns and gangs. And again, the superintendent can address some of those things. But anybody who's lived in the city for any length of time knows that we've seen these spikes in violence. And what do we historically do? We throw massive amounts of police resources at them. And it brings it down, but only temporarily. Only temporarily. I've been living in Chicago since 1986, and I've seen this spike and trough. And I know and believe in my heart that we cannot just arrest our way out of this problem. If you look at the sheet on your table, $1.9 billion, $1.2 billion in investments, it means we've got to invest our way out of this problem once and for all by looking at the root causes of violence, by making sure that we're providing affordable housing, jobs, real opportunity, and so that these young men that are growing up in these neighborhoods who are causing the violence, they have an opportunity, if they take it, at their fingertips to see a life and themselves in that life that is beyond their immediate circumstances. That is the goal that we've got to also focus on while we're dealing with the things that are going to work right now in the short term to bring the violence down. The long-term play, and frankly, the better investment for your hard-earned tax dollars is intervening with these children at the earliest possible stage of life, through the parks, through the schools, through other activities that show them that they have a future, that they are loved and supported in their communities. So I'll stop there. We're a small group, so I think we're going to be able to get to a lot of questions. Thank you again for coming out on a Saturday afternoon, a rainy one. We'll get you out of here sooner rather than later because my wife is out west in her hometown, about 2 hours away. It's snowing out there, so we want to make sure we get you home before the snow flies, right, Cole?
Thank you, Mayor. And I wanted to give CEO Martinez and the other dignitaries on the stage a chance to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. Pedro Martinez, CEO for the Chicago Public Schools. I'm really a Chicago kid growing up on the Lower West Side, and just know that CPS is following the leadership of the mayor. We are investing to make sure that our schools are stronger than ever, that we have a strong recovery year for so many challenges that our staff and children and parents have seen through COVID. And we've had amazing partnerships with my colleagues here, but it really is about a time for investment. It really is about a time to build on strengths and really make sure that working with the mayor and my colleagues, that we make the city really the best city it can be, because I'll tell you, I left for 12 years, came back home, and I say this to everybody, there is no more beautiful city than the city of Chicago. So thank you, everyone. Blessed to be here.
Superintendent David Brown, and I'm here to listen more than talk. One thing I will emphasize, though, is we're really looking for strategic collaborations with all of our neighborhoods. And I'm listening for, where are the gaps in our deployment strategy? Where do we need to have more foot and bike patrols, more cars? Where do we need to have more collaborations with nonprofits? So we're really looking at fighting and reducing violent crime through collaborations, and collaborations with you. Listening to you more than we talk, so we can make the best use of our resources. Now, we are focused on taking illegal guns off the street. We are focusing on gangs and drugs that are the root driving forces of our violence, as well as, though, the collaborations that make sense, that uplift our young people, that get them in the right direction. Again, Mayor says it often, and I repeat it, we can't just arrest our way out of reducing violent crime. We've got to collaborate with one another and listen to one another, and obviously respond to some of the concerns you expressed in a very, very urgent way. The sense that we have that right now is the most important time for us to work together. Thank you.
I'll say hi again. I'm Tamara Mahal. I'm the Chief Coordination Officer for Community Safety, and as mentioned, run the Community Safety Coordination Center. We're working with everyone's departments, these and a bunch of the folks in the crowd too, to implement that comprehensive approach to violence reduction. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alison, Commissioner at the Chicago Department of Public Health. A lot of you got used to hearing from me about COVID over these last couple of years, and it's really great to be here in person and having conversations about the direct and the indirect effects that COVID has had on this city, and really being thoughtful about how we come back from this pandemic, and come back in a way that is honest about the inequities and disparities and all the ways in which we were not getting it done as a city prior to COVID. And you'll hear probably more, but we're working a lot on especially mental health issues in Chicago.
Good afternoon. My name is Brandy Kanazi. I'm the Commissioner for the Chicago Department of Family and Support Services. We are the city's human and social service arm for the city, and so we support early learning and youth programs all the way up to service programs through the senior years. Just a little bit about the department. We have 6 community service centers across the city, 22 senior centers, and we work with a cohort of nonprofit organizations. A little bit about myself. I'm a product of Southside. I've graduated from CPS schools, and I'm just really happy to be in this role and to serve my great city. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So this is a small group, and while some of our larger groups, we got hundreds of questions, we actually have fewer than a dozen questions from this room, but I think it'll give us a chance to have better dialogue. And so I'm going to start with a question that we have not heard at any of the other town halls. Under root causes, why isn't low prosecutions and prosecution of repeat offenders on the chart?
That's a good question. Well, I'll start, and then I'm going to invite Alison. You know, we view violent crime as a manifestation of underlying problems. And prosecution really is a tool to address the problem, but it's not a root cause per se. Because people are getting involved in crime for a variety of reasons. From my perspective, a lot of it is poverty. A lot of it is the absence of. In many of the neighborhoods that are most plagued by violence, where you see young men going to the street, picking up weapons, they're doing that in part because they do not believe that they have any other options. When we have starved neighborhoods of resources, of jobs, of businesses, the kind of amenities that we take for granted in many parts of the city. Some of you may not know that if you go to certain neighborhoods on the west or the south side in particular, you don't see pharmacies. You don't see grocery stores. You don't see branch banking. You certainly don't see sit-down restaurants or the kind of things that in other neighborhoods of the city we take for granted. What you do see is a lot of vacant lots, dilapidated buildings, no green space, no safe places for kids to gather, or families, or intergenerational. So that absence of is a real problem. And on the other hand, when you have those kinds of resources in community, it definitely is a deterrent to violent crime. And don't get me wrong, as a former prosecutor, and I think if you paid attention to anything that myself or the superintendent have been saying for the last year and a half, locking up violent, dangerous people must be a priority in our city. It must be. There are too many violent, dangerous people walking the streets pending trial. And again, they're absolutely, under our laws and our Constitution, entitled to a presumption of innocence. But when you pick up a gun, when you shoot somebody, when you try to shoot somebody, when you kidnap them, when you rape them, when you murder them, I think you should be locked up. And that is a real conversation that we must have. That's what we must have as a community. But that doesn't preclude us also looking at the real root causes of the violence. What is it that caused the 15-year-old, the 16-year-old, the 25-year-old to pick up a gun and solve what in many instances are very petty disputes with a gun? You know, back in the day, and I'm old enough to remember this, if you got into a verbal dispute with somebody, you didn't pick up a gun and you didn't pick up a knife, right? You might have had fisticuffs, right? You may have gone to the mat with somebody, but you weren't picking up a gun. And last year, the Chicago Police Department took 12,000 illegal crime guns off the streets. 12,000. That is more than New York or LA combined. And we do that every single year, right? And it's not because we've got a better strategy or more focus on guns. It's because we are awash in guns. They are pouring across the border, and they are ending up in the hands of children, young people who have no business possessing a firearm. So yeah, we absolutely have to get tough on violent, dangerous people. No one is going to dispute that, and least of all me, this former federal prosecutor. But I also know that there's a cause and effect. And the violence is a symptom of a larger problem. Violence is a symptom, in my view, of a community that is at risk and in crisis. And if we don't address that, we're going to be right back where we were. We're going to bring violence down this year. I have no doubt whatsoever that that's going to happen. We're already seeing that progress. But folks, don't you want to do that for the long haul? Don't you want to bring peace to our neighborhoods once and for all? Don't we want to spend less money on policing and more money on the things that are important? Do we not want to not raise our taxes because the violence and the need to hire more and more and more police? If you believe, like I do, that we have to make the right strategic investments, then we got to start here and now. And again, we're not going to turn it around in a moment's notion. Many of the manifestations of the violence that we've been seeing, not just here in Chicago, but all across the country, but here in particular, are absolutely the result of our failure to invest in neighborhoods, in people, in places. And if we want to bring peace to Inglewood, to Roseland, to Austin, to River North, to Lakeview, and other areas of our city once and for all, we need to make those investments now. We cannot keep waiting. It's not an either-or proposition, it's both and. Yes, more focus and attention on gangs and guns and holding violent, dangerous people accountable. I'm all about it. But I want to make sure that that young kid, before they pick up a gun, has had so many touches along the way, from preschool to elementary school to junior high and high school, in the parks, in the libraries, and with loving, caring adults who are looking out for them. That is how we create the village to stop the madness that is happening in too many places in our city.
We have a similar
I promise I won't filibuster, but the question really got me going. I want to make sure that we have a dialogue and not just a monologue from me.
This is actually a recurring question articulated here, though, too. It's about violent crime, especially on the CTA. And what is the CTA transit unit and the CTA doing? Can it be augmented? And I know we made an announcement about something recently.
Yeah, I'll start out. So CTA and CPD collaborates quite a bit, but even more so, we need to collaborate regarding private security CTA hires, and they're hiring even more. That's in the pipeline, soon to come, more and more private security in collaboration with CPD resources, which we've increased, and we're going to increase even more as we fill our vacancies. And we've had some really great progress recently on filling our vacancies in the police department. So soon to come, already on the ground, particularly at what we did. We did a data look at where are the highest incidents of these types of crimes happening that are violent, drug-related, et cetera, maybe even just quality of life, so that we can have resources on fixed posts there. In addition, we want to make a commitment, and we have, with having officers ride the train more, not just on the platforms, not just at fixed posts, but actually be on the trains where we know we have some of this criminality happening, so we can address it immediately. There's a very, very good camera system on the CTA, so we also need to have real-time responses to what we're seeing on the camera system. So some of these things happen, but they happen and no one ever says or does anything on the train. So there's a lot more I can discuss. We made a big announcement, but we are committed to adding whatever number of resources, both private security and CPD police officers on the trains where we are seeing, based on data, this criminality happening, to slow it down as we see ridership go up as we open more and more back up and we start seeing the events throughout the city where people are using public transportation to get to those events, to get out of the house. People are just tired of being stuck in the house. So we're responding as we're seeing more ridership with more resources, and we're committed to do whatever it takes to make the CTA safe.
Is there a specific strategy for dealing with gangs and organized crime?
Yes. By the way, I'm going to just keep my seat on this one because I wish I could sip some tea. So we had a really good case announced in D.C. First Deputy went and made the announcement with the Merrick Garland, the U.S. The Attorney General, where we had a gun case conspiracy from Tennessee where Army veterans sold guns to gang members in Chicago. And these guns they sold were used in violent crimes, in shootings and homicides. And so 4 of those offenders that were the primary purchasers of the guns were arrested in Chicago this week and charged with federal conspiracy to buy guns and commit violence. That's federal time in Idaho or wherever they send them outside. So that sent a very strong message that we haven't seen recently. So this was a collaboration with Chicago police officers, with undercovers, a collaboration with jurisdictions outside of Chicago so we can bring these people. So that's part of the strategy, to try and charge people with gun trafficking through the federal system to have serious consequences for this. There are more charges that we'll be filing on offenders for these types of conspiracies. There's a dedicated team we stood up last year for just gun investigations that are dedicated to pursuing these charges, because gun trafficking is the scourge of blood money that feeds our violence. And people feel like just being arrested for possessing an illegal gun is you're in and out of jail, but trafficking, gun conspiracies, you are not in and out of jail. You're held to a trial in the federal system, and then you're charged to the fullest extent of the law in the federal system. So I hope that answered the question.
Do you want to? You can jump in.
Sure.
What Tamara's going to add to. Go ahead.
I think another thing to add to that is the increases in funding from the city for street outreach. So for those of you that may not be aware, street outreach is a violence prevention mechanism where people from the life who have chosen to turn their life around actually go out and work directly with gangs and groups and cliques. And they work to mediate conflicts between them, but they also work to identify members that may want to get out and provide them with case management and support services to help them get jobs and education and mental health supports. And I'll just say, under Mayor Lightfoot's leadership, the city prior to her administration was only providing $1 million or so a year for this, but the Chicago Department of Public Health, under Mayor Lightfoot's leadership, has increased funding by 20-fold and continues to do so to support this other element around gang outreach.
Yeah, and I would just add to that public health fundamentally is actually about prevention. That is our entire approach. And there's at least one person here from our violence prevention team at the Chicago Department of Public Health. But prior to this administration, we had 5 people working on this in the city. And that is nowhere near what is needed. And so it is new, brand new, for the city to be making these kinds of investments. We've seen philanthropy step up and fill some of this space. We've seen other groups working on it. There have been so many folks in Chicago committed to working on this, but the city of Chicago has never really put a major stake in the ground on violence prevention before. And so we have millions of dollars for the first time funding some of this work that has been shown to work in other cities, and for the first time, millions of dollars for more in victim services. So if somebody is the victim of a crime, What can we do to make sure that they are getting the supports that are needed, not just mental health, but are there other pieces that are in there? And it's new, and it's needed, and growing, and I hope it's something that is sustained long-term, because law enforcement is a part of this, but so is actually setting up the prevention infrastructure that we need.
And I don't think this question is repetitive. I think it builds on what Dr. Arwady just talked about, and that is, what are we doing to address mental illness and homelessness?
Do you want to start, Alison, and then
Yeah.
Brandy can jump in?
Sure. So similarly, as long as we're talking about, major new investments and changes, when the mayor came in 2019, the Chicago Department of Public Health had about $12 million for mental health services. And that might sound like not a lot, but it's really not for a city of 3 million people, or almost 3 million. And we were serving about 3,500 people with mental health services. Again, not at all what is needed. And we've seen real investments even before some of the COVID dollars started flowing. And that we are now up 7 times, $86 million this year, from 12 to 86 million. And we've gone from serving about 3,500 people. We're on track this year for outpatient clinical services, 50,000 Chicagoans. And that's regardless of insurance, income, immigration status. But also, the health department has been trying to say the bigger gaps in this city are actually not around the clinic piece. It's around making sure first that people know how to get those services, but getting mental health services out of the dedicated clinics. So for the first time ever, we're working with the Chicago Police Department, the Chicago Fire Department, the 911 system, to actually embed mental health professionals in 911 response, so that it isn't the police if it's a primary mental health need taking the lead. And I'll hand it to Brandy to talk about homelessness. With COVID dollars, for the first time, again, ever, or at least in decades, we now fund primary health care and mental health care substance use services in Chicago's homeless shelters. And let me tell you, that investment, again, what is that? That's prevention, not waiting for someone to come to a clinic, bringing these services there. At some of our largest homeless shelters in this city, yes, that was good to help people get medical care, but you know what else? Major drop in the number of calls for ambulances, major drop, even bigger, in the calls to the Chicago Police Department. Getting people who have primary issues of mental health and substance use into the treatment that they need is part of taking care of that need in the health system, as opposed to, for too long, we've been trying to address it, I think, more first in the criminal justice system. And Brandy, I'll hand it to you.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna stand so first, I want to just level set about homelessness. Our goal at the city is to make instances of homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. In Chicago, it is not illegal for an individual to live on the street. So we always try to strike a balance between the needs of the communities that we serve and the needs of the residents who are living on the street. So there's a couple different ways that we attack homelessness in Chicago. One is through outreach. So we have staff at DFSS as well as our nonprofit partners who work with individuals and get those living on the streets and in encampments to come inside and take up shelter. But we know usually folks who live on the street, one engagement, one encounter is not going to get them to come inside. We find that it takes 5 to 7 times to come in. And so Alison talked about our partnership that we have. And so with that, we have an encampment strategy where we really work to make sure that if an individual chooses to live on the street, we respect that, but we make sure that we do so in a cohesive manner. So we work with Streets and Sand, and they come out and they assist with our cleanings. But we also bring a whole of of government approach to those encampments. And so during the pandemic, we actually worked with the health department to make sure that we have a doctor that's on site with us to go out and not just provide vaccines, but also medical care. We bring our nonprofit partners, Catholic Charities, Salvation Army, Night Ministry, a whole nother others, but we all come together and make sure that if people need access to benefits, we help them get their benefits. If they need to connect to the pharmacy, we're doing that, right? So that whatever they need, they're getting, so that when they're ready to come in, we come in, they can come inside. I want to also just talk about innovations for a second, and that we have a low barrier shelter. It's the only one in the Midwest where people can come and go 24/7. So most people think of a traditional shelter and they're like, you're in and you're in by 7 and you got to leave by 7 a.m. This allows people the flexibility to get used to having that autonomy, but inside. So that's one step. Second thing that we've done since the pandemic is we received $35 million in CARES funding to help with rapid rehousing. That has been tremendous, and I can't really tell you all the joy we feel from having that money. So pre-pandemic, just to give some advice about that, it would take us about 200 days to house someone, and we would do about, 300 to 500 people housed a year. With that $35 million, we've been able to house 1,500 people and bring that time down with our partners from 200 days to 45 to 60 days. Guys, that is like amazing. So what we're doing is we're taking the investment that we received for $20 million in ARP, that's gonna allow us to house over 2,000 individuals in the next year. We're already at 1,500. That's going to take us further. Second thing is our shelter partners. We received $20 million in ARP because we realized that in order to keep people safe, when you have a congregate setting, sleeping head to foot, people on top of each other, that relates to communicable spread, not just for COVID, but other communicable diseases. And so we're taking that money to help shelters transform their system. Last thing is we've got $71 million in home funding, or bond funding rather, and that's really going to allow us to help move the shift, right? Shelter is not the only stop on the trajectory, getting people in their home. It's a cycle off the street, into shelter, into your own home. And so we're going to use that money to be able to take a hotel or a motel, repurpose it into a shelter, and then long-term permanent supportive housing. So it's a journey, it's a continuum, but that's what we're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We lose the mayor in 10 minutes, so and there are 3 questions, so 3-minute answers. I'm going to tell you all 3 of the questions. The first one is...
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
I'm too old to
fine.
remember 3 things at once.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Got it.
Can the city, along with trade unions, develop a program where vacant schools can be used to train young teens in skilled jobs? And I know that's a bit of a softball because you just did something amazing. So,
yes, we can, and yes, we are. You want to start, or I'll start, and then I'll have you. Look, my view is Chicago Public Schools has had amazing success, particularly in recent years, in improving graduation rates, great test scores, number of scholarships. But what I also know is true is this: 70% of our kids qualify for free or reduced lunch. So if we deconstruct that a little bit, what does that mean? That means in many of our children's households, they're led by single parents, often women of color, who are struggling to be able to put food on the table, to be able to keep housing. And so college is not necessarily going to be for every one of our kids, and no shame in that. What we need to do is make sure that we give opportunity. You've heard me say that a lot today. We've got to give opportunity to all our kids so that they can pick from a menu of options, one of which has to be our trades. Because if you are trained as a skilled carpenter, electrician, a plumber, you are guaranteed a middle-class income for your rest of your life, which you can build upon. You can pass on wealth to your children. So one of the things that we know is we've got to bring the trades into our school. So I'll start, and then I'm going to invite CEO Martinez. Working with the trades, we just recently put on a phenomenal experience for young people in CPS, particularly those kids that are at schools or in circumstances where the likelihood that they're going to college is pretty slim. So I teed you up, Pedro.
Thank you, Mayor. So we had an amazing, and this is really led by the mayor and you know, working with us, we had a show where we had 3,000 students, by the way, including 1,000 middle schoolers that were exposed to everything from carpentry to masonry, electricians. And we have great programs in the district, but I'll tell you, you know, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we, first of all, working with our union partners, making sure that we're up to date and making it accessible to our students. Because a lot of times, my parents had a second grade education. My father, you know, worked in a factory all his life. We just didn't have the knowledge. We didn't have the information. And so one of the things that we're working on is making sure that these programs are accessible. We're up to date, but I think, for example, the skill show is a great example of just even giving the students the ability to see it, to understand it. And so we're going to continue to build on that, but more to come. But just know this is something that, and I'll just say with this, it's all the above. Children should have choices, whether it is joining the trades, whether it's going to the community college, going to a university. So that's our goal, and we're going to make sure that these offerings are all over our high schools.
And I'll just add, I mean, this was a phenomenal experience. It was over at McCormick Place. All the trade unions were represented there, plus employers. It was interactive. Kids could literally learn how to lay brick, roof. ComEd was there, had a pole. If you were daring, you could climb up the pole using little spikes. But it was a phenomenal experience. 3,000 young people went through that over the course of 3 days. And we're going to make this an annual event. But importantly, we're going to get more trade opportunities into our high schools, because we know that we've got to give lots of different opportunities for young people to have great paying jobs and bright futures.
Yay. What resources, you may see I gave Cole a microphone. What resources are available for residents who want to clean up their neighborhoods?
Commissioner, come on up, man. This is ready-made for you.
Oh, careful.
Block clubs after
A tort.
Tell us who you are.
Good afternoon.
They'll turn it on.
Good afternoon, everybody. Cole Stollard, Commissioner, Department of Streets and Sanitation. We'll take all the help we can get. We're the third largest department in the city of 2,000 people. That's the size of our department. But as we all know, it's a work together effort. We have reentry folks that help us out. We're trying to get the SWAP back in the game. We work with the state, which is can be challenging at the time, but it is an all hands on deck. We have Clean and Green coming up, which we're here for everybody. We will supply tools, we'll supply bags, rakes, shovels, and we'll coordinate it in an effort to where you can see all your hard work come with the pile of bags on the corner, and you just let us know and we'll pick it up immediately with a garbage truck. So we have 300 garbage trucks out a day. You'll see throughout the community. We started our sweeping schedule started on the 1st. So you'll continue to see us do that. We have 50 sweepers that we put out into the neighborhood. Alderwoman King's favorite time of year is weed cutting. That'll be starting in May. So we finally got some tractors that worked out well in the neighborhoods to try to make things better. So with the administration, the mayor, we've had success, and hopefully continue to see the city getting cleaner. That is the goal.
Can you talk a little bit about the expressways and who has responsibility where, but also recently what you all have done?
Point of clarity, the states handle the expressways. The states handle the graffiti on the expressways. With this administration, we've worked with the state, and we helped them out with some graffiti prior to the holidays. You'll see the graffiti coming down. They're required to pick up, clean up, and we kind of use that as a leverage to put some of your resources on picking up paper, where they have 15 people dedicated to each expressway. They're starting to sweep, but the mayor tasks myself, along with Commissioner Biaggi, on keeping Omar from the state at task to continue it on. So hopefully we'll continue to see things getting better.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Tina, Tamara's going to jump in a little bit to talk about
But
budget.
okay, 18 seconds, because there's a really good question. I got 3 minutes.
All right, I'll just be really quick. I will say, Commissioner Stollard mentioned a new day that's coming up, April 23rd, citywide clean and green. If you or someone you know is interested in volunteering for that, we give out all the resources. You just got to call 311 and let them know, and they'll get you set up. But I'll just also say a huge part of our effort starts on the block level, and that means that we are going to be supporting the expansion and strengthening of block clubs. Whether you call it a block club, a civic association, a neighborhood association, we're going to be out there giving you resources. So if you need, if you're in one of those associations, you want to work on cleaning up your block, feel free to email cscc@cityofchicago.org, and we'll work with Streets and Sand to get you those resources out there. It's part of our overall violence prevention effort. Thank you.
Great. Last question. I put the investments up on the screen. You all can see them there. And the question is, how does the community access these investments?
Great question. In a couple of different ways. Number one, a lot of these investments are going to go to small community-based organizations, and we've already been working really since the start of the year to make sure we're understanding what the needs are on a community-based level and really down to the block. But also, I want to remind you, every alderman this year got a $100,000 pot of money to give out micro grants in neighborhoods. Every single alderman. So we know, sitting at City Hall, even with the best of intentions, we're not going to see every single community need down to the block level as much as we try. That's why we want to make sure that the aldermen are empowered with real resources to be able to get that done. So you should be talking to your alderman, make sure that all of them, it's not one size fits all of them have different standards that they're going to use for distribution of micro grants, but talk to your local alderman, and that's an immediate way in which community members can access funds to help support a cleanup. If you've got a senior that needs some additional support, if you've got something in a park or a library, whatever it is, those resources are going to be readily available. And then start talking to members of the faith community, local block clubs, community-based organizations that deal with young people, that deal with seniors, mental health. Those are the streams of resources, affordable housing, you name it. Those are the streams of resources that are going to be available on a larger scale, up to literally tens of millions of dollars.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can also, and I just want to get this up on the screen, it's www.chicago.gov/Chicago Recovery. Yes. So all of the RFPs that come out associated with these dollars are on Chicago Recovery, all one word. And if you just go to the City of Chicago website, you'll be able to obviously find this microsite. So I want to thank everyone for being here. It is 4 o'clock. It is like Cinderella and the pumpkin and all that. But Mayor, closing words, and then you got to go.
Yes, I know. I've got like 3 other events today. I just again want to thank you all. Coming out, sharing the stories that you have, the concerns that you have, and some of you being very vulnerable at tables with strangers, but talking about the things that are really important to you around community safety. That's a big deal. And we've learned a lot from this experience. I don't know if Tina said this, but all the questions with answers will be compiled. We intend to put out a book with questions and answers from the various community town halls that we've held across the city. So again, I want to thank you and keep holding us accountable. We serve you. We serve you, and we want to do the best job that we possibly can, working in concert with you to address your immediate needs around community safety. So God bless and thank you all.